Who do you turn to for advice? Sometimes your best friends, brothers, cousins, aunt just isn't good enough. What then? See what Sarah says. In the same tradition of Dear Abby, Sarah is a gently blunt, practical, and wise advisor who brings with her a wealth of personal and professional knowledge coupled with gentle humor. Sarah offers inspiration and advice to help you live more fully and powerfully in your own life. Tune in every week to connect with the information and ideas you need to hear.
Well, hello and welcome to the Sarah Says Show. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're filming in the studios at TCN, which is home of the Country Network, and you can check them out by visiting tcncountry.net. And I'm very excited to invite you to download their app and be ready, because at some point in the future, Sarah Says Show will be on the app. So again, tcncountry.net, and go to the App Store and download the app. It will help you be ready for when we get on their app. So I want to help you understand why we're here, what I hope to accomplish. For the past 20 years, I have worked diligently to build the life that I've imagined. And I vividly remember the moment back in 1998 when I was literally laying on the floor of my apartment after crying for hours. I was physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually devastated by some things that had happened. And I felt crushed. I felt broken and defeated. And at that moment, I was questioning the universe. Is this it? Is this my life? Is this all I have to look forward to, all I have to hope for? And at that moment, I heard in my head something that a friend had said. Actually, a couple things a friend had said to me. One of them was, take control of your destiny or everyone else will. And the second thing was, it's never too late to become the person you might have been. And at that moment, I realized that at 40 years old, I had to make a decision. I had to choose. And I chose life. I chose hope and health and healing. And so for the past 20 years, I have worked to build that life, and I have learned a lot of things. I have been through 3 marriages. I'm a bit of a slow learner, but my third marriage has lasted 20 years. And I've learned how to be parent to my children, grandparent to 10 grandchildren. I've also lost about 120 pounds and gained health. And I've built, bought, and sold several businesses. And through it all, I've learned a few things. And one of the things that I've learned stands out as being, if not the thing, one of the foundational things that I want to weave into all of the shows that I will ever do for you. And that is that we have to retake our personal power. We give it up every single day. Every single moment, we are often giving up our personal power, our ability to choose, our ability to retake control of our life. And so by doing this show, I want to teach you, show you, help you, guide you to know ways that you can retake that personal power. I think that we've given it up because we maybe sometimes don't know we have it. We don't realize that we are the magic. We think that we have to buy that new thing or have that new thing, or we're not pretty or skinny or smart enough. But the reality is you are enough. You already have everything you need. And so as you watch this show, if you think of a way that I can help you, if you have a question about any of the topics that we have, I want you to connect with me and message me on social media through Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Sarah Z Says. That's SARAH, Z as in zebra, says, SAYS. And I always will ask you to indulge me. I have notes that helps me keep on track and on time. And so today we're going to be delving into the subject of Alzheimer's and its impact on the family, its impact on our society, and how we can navigate through this difficult circumstance in the best way possible. The person who has Alzheimer's is not the only one that's affected. The family's affected, the neighborhood's affected, the culture, the society's affected. There are new normals that have to be established. And I even have some statistics here. According to a study from Stanford University, 40% of Alzheimer's caregivers are dying from stress-related illnesses because of the stress of taking care of a loved one with Alzheimer's, and they're dying before the patient dies. And so we need to change that. And I've chosen to focus on Alzheimer's not because I have so much personal experience with it, but also because 2017, deaths from heart disease went down 9%, while deaths from Alzheimer's increased 145%. And this disease is not going to go away. It's going to continue to impact our society. And so my own experience is that a little more than a decade ago, my mom had dementia, and she died from some of the complications from that. And I'll never forget that there was a day where she didn't know who I was. And it was so incredibly painful for me. And so when your loved ones forget who you are, there's a whole lot that has to go into how do I manage how I feel? How do I manage how I treat you? How do I manage what is happening here? And there's so much that we don't know that we don't know. And so this episode is going to give you some of the tools, information, and resources that you need to navigate some of these difficult waters. But I want you to think about how you've been impacted by it and how is being a primary caregiver affecting your life. And so when we get back from this commercial break, you're going to meet my first two guests, Karen Telschow Johnson, who is a prominent attorney here in Fort Worth, who specializes in estate planning and elder law, and Audrey Kwik, who is with the Alzheimer's Association. So don't you go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Coming up, Sarah will be chatting with Karen Telschow Johnson, Esquire, Vice Chair for the Board of Directors of the North Central Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and Audrey Kwik, Program Director, Alzheimer's Association, North Texas. They will be talking about many of the legal and caregiving logistics of navigating the affairs and care of a loved one with Alzheimer's. Connect with Sarah on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Sarah Z Says. Now stay tuned for inspiration, information, and advice on how to retake your personal power.
The Country Network. It's your country. TCN is your place for country music. Go to tcncountry.com and click the pick to select the new TCN app on 7 of the most popular streaming platforms. From the rising stars to the superstars, TCN brings you exclusive live performances and original content. And now with the TCN app, you can take it with you wherever you go. The Country Network. It's your country.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Sarah Says Show. In this segment, I'm going to be visiting with Karen Telschow Johnson, who's a prominent attorney in Fort Worth, and she focuses on estate planning and elder law. And then we have Audrey Kwik, who is with the Alzheimer's Association. So we're going to start with Karen, give her an opportunity to tell you a little bit about her. Karen, one of the things, we've known each other for a couple years, but one of the things is you astonish me with all the extracurricular activities that you have. You sit on a couple of boards. So let's start by sharing that information. What are some of the other organizations you're involved in?
All right, so I'm vice chair of the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Association of North Texas.
Okay.
I'm also recently named to the board of 60 and Better, which handles a lot of our social programs around Tarrant County and Fort Worth for community centers. For the elderly, a lot of activities and lunches, hot meals served every day, and it's a fantastic program to get the elderly more social. And also, Fort Worth is a part of the Fort Worth Safe Communities, and they have an elder abuse prevention task force, which is very important, and I'm just proud to be a part of that group as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
And now, I have to ask, Audrey, you have been with the Alzheimer's Association for about a year, and you are the program director, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're doing with the Alzheimer's Association. What do you like the best about that?
Wow. So what I like the best, I have to say, first of all, is my team, because I have an amazingly dedicated group of people that I work with. And of course, I love working with the constituents that we work with and the community that we serve. So my dad actually has Alzheimer's, and he's far away in Ireland. So I feel like it's really nice to be able to do my piece here close to home for our local community. I find that very rewarding. So what my team does is we provide the programs and services to help people going through this disease, both the people suffering from the disease and their families. We connect them to resources and help guide them along their journey.
Well, I think it's super critical. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're talking about a disease that is not going to go away, and it's impacting more and more people all the time. But this particular segment of the show, we're going to be talking about some of the practical implications. And so I've asked these ladies to come on so that we're going to start with Karen. And I think it's important that people understand, how did you get into this? I mean, you go to law school and you have to figure out where you want to go. But what was the tipping point that actually got you into this kind of law?
So it became very apparent to me early on that treating people who are older, it's like the minute they have white hair, they're invisible. Right?
Why do you think I dye my hair?
yeah, back at you. All right, and but some of the most important people in my life who helped raise me were my grandparents. And my grandparents weren't old people. My grandparents were people that, I knew, from their 40s on, who were just people that got older. Right. And so, and my grandfather had always been bald because he had had a surgery like sometime in his 20s and lost his hair and it never grew back. Right. So he was always bald. My grandmother, she had, brownish hair that turned white, gray and then white. And so these are the people that picked us up from school and took us to get school clothes. And they weren't old people. They were people.
Right.
And so it became important to me as I developed my career to really, I saw old people being neglected and being made to feel small and invisible. And that so getting into the practice of protecting families' legacies and dealing with making sure that that's protected. And then as people age, protecting them through elder law, then, it just is a strong passion of mine from early on.
Well, and I think too often people hear an attorney say, well, I want to help you protect your assets. And they're like, yeah, you just want to make money. Well, I think one of the things that's super important, and I'm going to ask Karen to elaborate on this, is super scary. And I use the word super, I would say super duper scary, is what can happen if you don't have the correct legal documents in place. And sadly, I've seen people who have had parents age and they don't have the right legal documents in place. And so when Karen's talking about protecting, she's literally talking about protecting you and your parents and your loved one with Alzheimer's, whether it's your spouse or your parents or grandparents. So
exactly right.
As you and I have had conversations about this, you had mentioned something that just scared the daylights out of me. And so I want you to talk about that. I think the Texas guardianship thing that can happen. So for anybody who may not know what that is, will you lay out what happens if with a Texas guardianship, and then we'll talk about how to make that not happen.
Right. So in the state of Texas, under the statute, any person, literally any person, those two words, have the right to contact the court to institute a guardianship investigation and then potentially have a guardianship application filed against them. And so you're
So if you don't like how I'm taking care of my parent, you can file this thing, and I don't have the right to take care of my parent anymore. Potentially, because you say you're better able.
Right. You have the right to file an application. Other people then can come in and contest that application.
Wow.
Family has to be notified of the proceeding. So siblings, adult children have to be notified of guardianship proceeding. But a guardianship proceeding in Texas, it strips you of all of your civil rights. You lose potentially the right to vote, the right to handle your money, enter into any contract, even the right to enter into a contract with an attorney. So if a guardianship proceeding is held that then declares you being incapacitated, you no longer can then hire an attorney to fight it. Right? And so you have to fight it from the beginning. And you potentially lose. There are different types of guardianship in Texas. Guardianship of the estate is handling the finances. A lot of times we try and avoid that with financial powers of attorney or being an alternate payee for Social Security, which is everybody's, sometimes their largest check, unfortunately.
Right.
And so there's alternatives to that. And the courts have us go through all of the alternatives prior to getting to a guardianship proceeding. But then there's guardianship of the person. And that's what we're usually dealing with Alzheimer's. Guardianship of the person dictates where somebody's going to live, whether or not they can drive, have the right to vote. And so that's
Tell me a
guardianship of the
story.
person in Texas.
I want people to understand how this plays out in real life. And sadly, you have at least 100 stories, but pick one where the documents were not in place and what actually can play out in a family.
Right. So a lot of times documents are not in place. And when we're talking about documents, the documents that can protect you against a guardianship is giving somebody the financial power of attorney, the statutory durable power of attorney in Texas, so that somebody legally has the authority to make decisions for you financially. They can go pay your bills, deal with the insurance company, deal with the IRS, deal with banking. You get to initial by all the rights that they get to do in that document. And without it, even a spouse does not have the legal right to make any decisions for you financially.
So if this guardianship is established that does not go in the spouse's favor, you have potentially a stranger or someone who's not the spouse taking care of it. So the worst case scenario is you don't have your documents in place, someone that you maybe don't know or don't like or don't want to be making these decisions.
Texas would have the ability to impose that upon you.
So let's talk about these documents. I will say, sadly, my husband had a major heart attack about 7 years ago, and I can assure you,
I can't believe it's been that long already. Wow.
I know, it was like yesterday, wasn't it? But we had documents in place, but we got better documents afterwards. And I want you to talk about, if you're watching this show and you don't have these documents she's getting ready to mention, figure it out, because it's a horrifying thought that the state can then come in and say, you can't take care of your spouse or loved one. So what are some critical documents that need to be taken care of?
The financial power of attorney, which is a statutory durable power of attorney, meaning that it's good for the duration. And so you can have an executive power of attorney, which means that it's effective when signing. All right. And then some people, they initial by the choice, well, I don't want it effective until I'm incapacitated. And I will tell you, I have had that family in my office where the adult son, is wanting to take care of mom's finances. Mom stopped going to the doctor, and so can't get a diagnosis of incapacity, but she's definitely incapacity. And he literally has a piece of paper he can do nothing with, because they did some form 5 years ago.
Online?
Probably. And I'll tell you one of the saddest cases. So this woman was in ICU, and they told her she had 6 months. She was almost 2 years from some type of esophageal cancer that had metastasized and what have you. She had radiation, and there was radiation burn, and it was bad, and she was never going to leave the ICU. Her car, prior to going into her last treatment, she had taken to a mechanic's, and she was the only one in title on her car. And it had been repaired, and the repairs had been paid for. And the son who was a Marine, who did the weather. I did not know Marines did the weather, but they do. From Japan, had come in, and his sister had been living with mom. Mom had been living with her. And they went to the mechanic, and they said, we need to take the car out. And they said, you have no legal authority to do that. Well, mom's in the hospital. She's not leaving the hospital. They had done a form online. But Texas has a very specific statutory form giving guidance as to authority, as to what people can do. And
nothing.
That form wasn't going to work. Yeah. So anyway, they brought me in, and we got the form done, and so they can get out the car. But literally, this woman had nothing else. She had a bank account that the kids were earning on, and she had a car. And she literally had about a week to live. And we were about to have to potentially go for a probate, only because
They
the
didn't have the
vehicle
right form.
was going to have a mechanic's lien on it. They didn't have the right form. So we got to avoid a probate situation because we were able to take care of things prior to mom passing away.
So let's talk real quick, and then I want Audrey to talk about some Alzheimer's information that's really important. If you were to recommend to the viewers one or two very distinct action items that they need to engage in before this is the thing, folks. You don't want to learn CPR when your loved one is laying on the floor needing CPR, right?
Right.
We don't think that way. We think, I should learn CPR before I need it. So with legal documents, you want to get the legal documents before you need them. You've got a couple of action items that you've mentioned to me, and let's talk about those.
Okay, so the documents that need to be done, everybody needs a will. Everybody has to have a will. There's no automatic in the state of Texas regarding who gets what.
Okay.
And so you have to have a will that says this is where things go, especially with blended families. You have to have a financial power of attorney. You have to have the medical power of attorney, listing the people that you trust to make medical decisions, and that may not be the people that they think it is. You also need a guardianship for self document. This is a document that's used in a court of law that says that these are the people I would trust to be my guardians. Okay. And so importantly, you have the right to exclude people.
Nice.
I would avoid many areas of litigation if we could just exclude people automatically, and we can in that document. And so, and you have to have family meetings when you place people in these positions of authority. Everybody needs to be sitting down versus one person taking mom to one attorney and another person taking mom to another attorney.
And in the second segment, we're going to really talk about that emotional intelligence that's required. Yeah. But before we run out of time, Audrey, I would love for you to talk about Alzheimer's Association is one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you.
It's one of the go-tos. And I, in the next minute or two, talk about some of the statistics, some of the information about Alzheimer's and what's happening in the country with it.
Sure. So right now today, there are 5.8 million people in America living with Alzheimer's disease. And if that number seems staggering, it's a number that we anticipate will grow hugely. Mm-hmm. So as our population continues to age, we expect that by 2025, there'll be over 13 million people living with Alzheimer's in the United States. And the thing about Alzheimer's is it doesn't just affect the person with the disease. Alzheimer's disease is unusual or not your typical disease. It places tremendous burden on the family, the community, and the people who are supporting the people walking that path with the disease.
If people needed to reach out to the Alzheimer's Association, Audrey, how would they do that?
Sure, you can find us online at www.alz.org, and there is a wealth of information there, both for people going through the disease, their families and caregivers, and anybody who even has a question about Alzheimer's or dementia.
Excellent. And Karen, if people needed to reach out and connect with you, how would they do that?
So www.tjlawpllc.com.
tjlawpllc.com
Yes,
and
thank you.
alz.org. So I have to tell you, thank you so much. And on the other side of this commercial break, I've got more resources for you, so don't you go anywhere.
In the second half of today's show, Sarah will be spending time chatting with Suzanne Groves, a communications and marketing executive whose mother is in the later stages of Alzheimer's, and Katharine O'Connor, an LPC with Omega Point Counseling, who specializes in offering counseling to caregivers of those with Alzheimer's. They're going to share their thoughts on the unseen and often unspoken struggles of the family members who are taking care of their loved ones with Alzheimer's. Do you have a problem or challenge you'd like Sarah to talk about? Connect with her on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Sarah Z Says. Don't go anywhere. Sarah will be right back with information and resources to help you retake your personal power.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Sarah Says Show. This is our resources section. And one of the things that you're going to find that I will do consistently is share resources, information, tools, tips, hints, tricks that you can access for free most of the time in your journey to retake your personal power and discover how to live your life more fully and completely. Well, today we're talking about Alzheimer's and dementia. And so I have got a few resources that I think are pretty powerful, and I want you to be able to get a hold of them too. So the first one is a website called caregiveraction.org. It's a free resource, and this particular organization is working to improve the quality of life for the more than 90 million people who are caregiving to loved ones with Alzheimer's or dementia. They have all kinds of resources. I don't even have the time to list it to you, but you can check it out. It is caregiveraction.org. The second resource is, of course, the Alzheimer's Association. And as our guest mentioned, Audrey, our guest earlier mentioned, you can go to Alzheimer, ALZ.org, and click on local resources. This, I think, is important. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. We've talked about Texas a whole lot, but wherever you are in the country, you can click on local resources and you can enter your zip code and it tells you what's available in your area. Now, let's say for some reason you can't get online. There's an 800 number, which is 800-272-3900. So whether it's online or by making a phone call, reach out to them and find out what resources are local to you. The third one is A Place for Mom. This is a resource organization that I have a high regard for. They have written a blog. It's a year or two old, and it's called The Big List of Alzheimer's Resources. And I'm just pulled out a few. And one of them is a message board for Alzheimer's caregivers. I think in many cases it's really nice to have another person, another group of people that you can say, sometimes I feel this way, sometimes I think this way. And they can say, yeah, we do too. Or perhaps they can share their coping skills, coping mechanisms with you. Another resource at A Place for Mom is caregiving tips and strategies. And so these are accumulated from all the people who give input into A Place for Mom. There's also communication strategies, because many times we want to say, remember, and sometimes there's language that we need to stop using and language we need to start using with our loved ones who have Alzheimer's or dementia. And so that's a great idea. Now, do you have a go-to resource that's helping you retake your personal power in this area? I want you to let me know. And again, you can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Sarah, SARAH, Z as in zebra, says, SAYS. Now, when we get back from this next break, you're going to get to meet my next two guests. One is Suzanne Groves. Her mom is in the mid stages of Alzheimer's. And then Katharine O'Connor, who is a licensed professional counselor who specifically works with people who have Alzheimer's, who are caregivers to those with Alzheimer's and dementia. So I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stay there, and we will be right back.
Do you have a question you'd like Sarah to answer? Connect with her on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Sarah Z Says. That's SARAHZSAYS. Your question might be answered on the next episode of the Sarah Says Show. You can also recommend a book, artist, or vlogger for Sarah to check out and maybe even showcase on the show.
So hello and welcome back to the Sarah Says Show. I'm super delighted to have you here with us again. In the second segment of this show, we're going to be talking about Alzheimer's on a more personal level. And so my guests are Suzanne Groves, who's a communication and marketing executive, and Katharine O'Connor, who is an LPC with her company, which is Omega Point Counseling.
correct.
Yay! So I have to give kudos to Suzanne while I can today because she's kind of hard to catch. This year, which is the inaugural year of the award, Suzanne has been named by Reagan Communications and PR Daily as one of the nation's top women in communication. So it's a delight to have you. And then Katharine, I would love for you to just spend a moment talking about your backstory, your history. 45 years. You've done quite a few interesting things. You were in the ministry for a while. You were an educator for a while. I'd love for you to visit for just a minute about what got you into counseling.
I spent my early life of ministry teaching in the Catholic Church from Buffalo, New York, through the rural areas of Texas. Ended up teaching at Nolan High School, where I went to high school. Did work in the Catholic Church. And then after I got my master's degree in divinity, I realized people kept asking me questions for help for which I was not educated. And so I got a master's degree in counseling, and I'm now pursuing a doctorate in marriage and family counseling. I guess the more you know, the more you know, and the more you need to know.
The more you know you don't know, right? And so the big thing that I think is important is that Suzanne has come on today being very willing to share her personal story about what's going on with her mom. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you trusting the Sarah Says Show with that story. So what I want to start with is the difficult thing that happens is that we know our parents aren't being themselves. And so I'm going to bounce back and forth between the two of you, but what did you first started noticing when you realized that things were not right with mom?
You know, when in the early stages, you don't really know what you're looking at, and dignity is a powerful tool, I suppose, that the person who is being afflicted will do everything they can to cover it up. Mm-hmm. So this probably started with my mother, who was already retired from a career as a litigator for the government and subsequently a judge, one of the smartest people I know. About 5 years ago, she just started forgetting things. And it was as simple as forgetting names or forgetting stories or forgetting what she'd eaten for lunch. And it progressed a little bit at a time up to 3 years ago. 3 years ago, she couldn't remember how to start her car. It was a push-button Lexus. She called my father in a panic because she said the car's not working. And then that happened again at my house when she went to leave. She was still driving. She later forgot how to use the microwave, forgot how to program her or plug in her cell phone. And it was always, and then I was noticing repetitive stories, like the needle stuck in the groove on a record. And when asked about it, because my father was very impatient, and sometimes I was as well, it was always, well, I didn't sleep very well last night. On a daily basis, I was hearing, I only slept 2 or 3 hours last night, because that was her way of trying to compensate for what has basically become a more rapid decline. But she knew something was wrong. She equated it with a loss of intelligence versus not understanding that her brain was dying and is
yes
dying.
And I think, Katharine, you probably see this in caregivers a lot. Nobody wants to think that the mental capacity of their loved one is diminishing. And you mentioned dignity. None of us, we get impatient because we think they're still fine. Why are you acting stupid? Or why are you acting crazy? Or why are you acting XYZ? How do you see, like, when we see this happening, how do you see that we can begin to shore ourselves up for what may be an inevitable conclusion?
Well, I think you have to be realistic that something's happening to your parent or the one you love, your spouse, could be, your mother or your father. And you realize that, this is something that you need to deal with and to not try to deny it. And begin to deal with it with lots of resources that are out there.
Right. And one of the ways I know that y'all dealt with it was you got an official diagnosis in some way.
Eventually. My mother, so things really escalated in October when she had a cardiac event that took her to the hospital, ICU, telemetry, rehab, and that sort of jarred, I guess, or accelerated the progression of all of this. We couldn't get her to go to doctor's appointments while she was still living in the house. My father would have neurology appointments set up for her, and that day she would have a stomach ache or not feel well. And so even getting her to a neurological consult was difficult. We did not get, she's now in assisted living. My father got her to her neurologist who had already given a diagnosis of dementia and put her on a medication designed to at least try and slow it down.
Right.
Apparently that's not working. So over the holidays, he got her to the neurologist and then took her back to her facility. And I had him over for dinner a couple of nights later and poured him a glass of wine. And he sat me down and he said, I didn't want to tell you this on the phone. And I don't want to tell Mom, but she has been officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
And I want to pause there because that's the devastating moment when they're not forgetting anymore. There is an official diagnosis. And so in that moment, you shift from being the child or the spouse to you become the caregiver. And one of the things in some digital conversations we had, you explained that caregivers don't want to think of it as a burden because they do love the person. Of
course.
But for a moment, will you talk about some of the implications of being that caregiver, the emotional implications, what ends up happening psychologically with us when we're having to provide care to someone who was okay just quote unquote just yesterday, and now they're not.
And again, it's the denial that we use to protect ourselves. Because none of us wants to think about this person who's been a judge or been an artist or been somebody special in your life, becoming less and less capable of dealing with life. You want to still respect them. You want to still treat them with honor. And yet you know that soon enough you will be doing for them what they can no longer do for themselves.
And that really comes back to that dignity and choice. We'll have a conversation a little bit later about that dignity and choice. And I think one thing that's super important to bounce back and forth is we want to continue to, there's demons that come out. There's the devils that come out. And we all know that family relationships are super complicated anyway because all of the childhood hurts and all that, it just all comes out. So for you, with your mom, and again, I sense that the big thing is that she was up here and her mental capacity was such a big deal and she was such a go-getter and got so much done that now all of a sudden is laid low. And so you're struggling with how do we continue to maintain the respect and dignity of someone who had such great mental capacity when that's diminished. And so what do you feel? I'm just curious about what the things, the demons that you struggle with that you just didn't expect?
I think one of the most difficult things for me is that, we're the product of how we were raised. So I'm very driven. I'm very much of a perfectionist. I'm hard on myself, and largely because I had a mother who was very driven, not particularly patient, not very much of a nurturer. I mean, she's very cognitive, but not very emotive, at least not with me, and not in a necessarily a positive way. And so one of the challenges for me has been, and kind of the surprising gifts I guess I found in this is recognizing that irrespective of how I was raised, I'm doing my best to give her and my father secondarily the patience and the support and the nurturance, but mostly the patience that I was not afforded. And gosh knows I don't know where it comes from.
Right.
But there's also that guilt on any given day that this may be the day I lose my temper. And I've done it a few times. Yeah. Or this may be the day that I decide that I just can't go and see her. And then I get a call that she's gone. So it's jockeying back and forth to how do you live your life when you're walking that tightrope that every conversation is going to be the last one.
And this is so poignant because of the conversation earlier about how caregivers' stress levels cause them to physically decline. And so from a therapist's perspective, how do you help someone to not answer the phone when do I not answer the phone and then deal with the guilt later because maybe she died, or do I not answer the phone knowing that they need me but I have nothing to give? How do you help? What is your advice to someone who's pouring themselves out but they need to engage in self-care?
Well, I mean, Suzanne and I have talked before, and I tell her, first of all, she's got to take care of herself.
Because, and caregivers don't.
Well, caregivers struggle with their own physical health, their psychological health. They kind of can fall apart when they are pouring their lives into someone else. Yeah. And the life of the person with Alzheimer's is diminishing. I mean, it's not going to get better.
And we think we can save them. Is that why you think many caregivers just hemorrhage themselves into the loved one?
That's what we do.
Yeah.
People who love people do that.
Yeah.
We love this person.
And
no matter what. And we want them not to be going through what they're going through. I think one of the things that I was thinking about some of the questions you had asked me, and one of the things that I think is very important to remember that this is not a child. This is a parent. This is a father. This is a mother. This is someone who has had a full-blown, real life. And they're not children. People say, oh, well, they're like children. No, they are not like children.
They may be behaving like children.
But they are not children.
They are not.
And that complicates, I was thinking when Suzanne was talking, it's like it's a complicated disease. Yeah. And one day, Mom's going to know Suzanne. The next time, she's not going to know Suzanne.
And that's painful. Super. I remember.
Of course. Yeah. Because what are you doing? You're trying to be helpful.
So how do we, if somebody's watching this show and we've really extrapolated a lot of the downsides, what are you finding some coping mechanisms for living with the new normal that may just help you get through the day?
I think for me, communications professional, who doesn't ask for help a lot, I've been trying to be very transparent with others because so many people don't want to talk about this either, and a lot of people don't understand it. Right. But then there's also that, I don't want to catch that. I don't want to catch that grieving that you're going through. I don't want to catch that. But I talk about it. I try and find humor where I can. Mm-hmm. It becomes, I will say, more and more difficult when there's a component toward the late stage that is the anger, the rage. When that kicks in, it becomes difficult. But I just try and I take her pictures so that she can tell me stories as much as she can dig into that long-term memory. And
that's cool.
And then I come home and I, quite frankly, fall apart and take a deep breath and move on.
And would you say, we have a short amount of time left, what ends up happening, she needs to talk, but her friends may be in compassion fatigue. And so that's why it's important to have one or two friends who are like, talk away.
And a really good therapist.
And a really good therapist. And that's really why I wanted to have you on here, so that people realize that going through something like this isolated is very dangerous.
And I think because we are those kinds of people who have done a lot to verify our own lives, we have to be willing to go to groups, listen to people who have a similar experience, and not be alone.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to be alone and to isolate.
It's true.
And it's important not to do that.
Speaking of not doing that, if people wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, how would they do that?
Omega Point Counseling, Katharine O'Connor, LPC.
Okay, all right. That's
a
perfect.
Website.
And then, of course, we appreciate you sharing your show. your show. We appreciate you sharing your story, because here's the thing. This is raw. This is very, very, very difficult. So I think for us to realize that the person with Alzheimer's or dementia is still a real person is super important. So when we get back from this next break, I'm going to tell you about 2 of my Save the World passion projects. I'm going to let you know how you can win one of my handmade quilts. And I'm also going to give you a sneak peek about the guests on the next show. So stay tuned.
How will you retake your personal power this week? Connect with Sarah on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Sarah Z Says and let her know. Use the hashtag SarahZSays. That's SarahZSays. Let Sarah's experience, knowledge, and sensible advice help you live your life fiercely and to the fullest.
The Country Network. It's your country. TCN is your place for country music. Go to tcncountry.com and click the pick to select the new TCN app on 7 of the most popular streaming platforms. From the rising stars to the superstars, TCN brings you exclusive live performances and original content. And now with the TCN app, you can take it with you wherever you go. The Country Network. It's your country.
Well, hello and welcome back to the last segment of the Sarah Says Show. It has just been a delight to have you be with us today. And so I want to talk about a couple of passion projects that I have. The first one is a cashew farm that I've been working on for several years in Africa. And this cashew farm that's a photo of Medard, who is a gentleman that I've been working with, and met him 4 years ago, and I actually went to Africa last year. And this is a Change the World project by helping a community start on 4 hectares of land, a cashew farm. They're also growing maize, aka corn, and working on watering systems. So if you want to find out more about that, I want you to go to gofundme.com/cashew startup, and you'll be able to see our progress over the last few years and be able to decide if you are led to help in any way. Friends, we say we want to change the world, but we really actually have to put our hand to it. And there's a lot of good work out there. So you find what resonates with you. And this is a project that has resonated with me. And it's pretty exciting that that community is going to be ecologically sound, harvesting cashews and corn, and learning to build an infrastructure that supports commerce within that area. So that's gofundme.com/cashew startup. Second thing is I would love to ask how many of you have bags of bags in your house, and I think we all do, and we know intimately, it's an intrinsic thing that we don't want to throw these away, so we save them, thinking we're going to do something useful, and what we do with them that's useful is we fill them up with trash and throw them away anyway. Statistically, there's about 5 trillion of these things made every year, and less than 1% of them gets recycled. And so I would love to introduce you to a concept that turns these into mats for the homeless. So Sarah's Bag Ladies is a nonprofit that I started last year in 2019. And this organization takes these bags and converts the bags into plastic yarn, which is then crocheted into fancy mats for the homeless. Not fancy, but mats for the homeless. And we work with the Salvation Army to disseminate these mats. And one of the things that we've heard back from the folks who get them is that they keep them off the ground. They help keep them warm in the winter and cool in the summer and dry when necessary. And I can't imagine a situation where we don't want to help the most vulnerable of our society. So dual purpose is converting these bags into mats. We're helping the environment. At the same time, we're helping the homeless. So I would encourage you to check it out. You can visit us on Facebook at Sarah's Bag Ladies, or you can go to sarahsbagladies.org and find out how you can help. We are primarily in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but more than happy to help you in whatever part of the country you're in start a chapter in your area. And one of the things we're doing is raising money. Every month we raffle off a quilt. I am a scrap quilter, and it gives me great joy to be able to convert scraps of fabric into quilts. So I want to show you something. This is one of my latest creations, which is called, it's a big quilt, but this is a quarter of it. It's called You're Mermazing. And so this quilt is about 64 by 72 maybe, and we are raffling it off, so you can check it out by going to visit the page on Facebook, Sarah's Bag Ladies, who's benefiting from it. It's Sarah's Bag Ladies on Facebook or sarahsbagladies.org. And another thing I want to tell you is that it's important to remember that what we've talked about today is super quick. I mean, it may seem like in an hour we have a lot of time, but we sure don't. And you can find the contact information for any of my guests today on our Facebook page. In the first segment, we had Karen Telschow Johnson, who's a prominent attorney in Fort Worth. We also had Audrey Kwik with the Alzheimer's Association. In the second segment, we had Suzanne Groves, who has a parent who's in the mid stages of Alzheimer's. And we had Katharine O'Connor, who's a licensed professional counselor. And I want you to feel comfortable and confident to reach out to any of them to get more information, resources that may help you. Because my friend's a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is not just for the person who receives that diagnosis. That it's devastating because it means that our brain is crumbling. And so many times our intellect and our personality is wrapped up in the parts of the brain that get lost. And so there are legal issues, medical issues, social, emotional issues that none of us can adequately be prepared for. But the biggest thing that I want you to think about is if you're not dealing with the issue, be grateful. If you have friends who are dealing with it, consider how you might support them in whatever way makes sense for you. But we can't ignore our friends, family, even in the workplace, folks who are on a daily basis dealing with this difficult diagnosis. So I want you to think about what makes sense for you in your life, in your circle of influence, and how can you support and help those people. I also want you to think about part of retaking our personal power is what can you be doing in your life that's going to positively impact your health as you age? I know it's a running joke at my house. My husband is 13 years older than I am, and so I'm watching him age, and luckily we don't have any symptoms of dementia or Alzheimer's, but I have to tell you, getting old is not for babies, and taking care of myself, sadly, was not important 20 years ago, but the older I get, the more important it is. And I want to encourage you to think about what kind of lifestyle changes you can make that put you in a position to age not gracefully, but to age healthfully. And so it is important to prioritize ourselves and to remember that our magic is something that we need to take care of and cultivate. So as a reminder, do you have a problem? Do you have a challenge in your life? Do you have a question about how you can retake your personal power? A question on emotional intelligence or anything else? Because I'm here to help. And the Sarah Says Show is going to do everything we can to offer you resources and advice and information, hints, tips, tricks on how you can retake your personal power. So connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Sarah Z Says. That's SARAH. Z is in zebra, says. And some future topics that we are going to be working on will be sociopathic relationships, how to understand those toxic people in your life, how to recognize if you're the toxic person. We're also going to be talking about the habits and patterns that we get into, because our habits are essentially hypnosis in action. And how are the habits and patterns in your life either helping or hurting you? And so I appreciate you being here with us today. We've been filming at the studios at TCN, which is the home of the Country Network. You can find them, again, check them out, tcncountry.net, and download that app so that when we get on the app, you can watch us. And until we get together again, my friends, you have been zinked.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Sarah Says Show. Remember, you already are everything you need to live the life you've imagined. Retake your personal power today. If you have a problem you want Sarah to help you solve or questions you'd like answered, find Sarah on social media and let her know. You can message her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Sarah Z Says. That's SarahZSays. Bye for now.